were celebrating inside, toasting to my ruin, their laughter echoing in the cold night air. They thought they had crushed me, taken everything, left me with nothing but shattered dreams and an empty bank account. They were wrong. I was a coiled spring, and the day they betrayed me was the day they signed their own doom. If you have a sibling, parent, or any family member that you would defend with your life, then subscribe now and join our family. My sister, Bethany, had always been demanding. Growing up, it was always her way or no way. She needed the newest clothes, the best toys, the most attention. Mom and Dad, bless their hearts, tried to be fair, but Bethany had a way of turning on the waterworks, of playing the victim, that usually got her what she wanted. I, Avery, learned early on to just let her have her way. It wasn't worth the fight. As we got older, her demands became more significant. She needed help with college, needed a loan for a car, needed a down payment on a house. I always helped where I could. I was doing okay, working my way up the corporate ladder, saving diligently, planning for a comfortable future. I honestly believed that was what family did. We supported each other. I never imagined that Bethany's insatiable appetite would one day target my retirement, the nest egg I had so carefully built over decades of hard work. The phone call came on a Tuesday. Bethany's voice, usually so bright and cheerful when she wanted something, was tight with forced concern. She launched into a sob story about a bad investment, a looming deadline, a desperate need for cash. Then came the punchline. She needed $185,000 now. My retirement fund was the only place she could get it quickly. I was stunned. $185,000? It was a king's ransom. I tried to explain to her, calmly, that it wasn't just sitting there waiting for her. It was my future, the guarantee that I wouldn't be a burden to anyone in my old age. I suggested other options, a loan from the bank, selling some assets, anything but raiding my retirement. But Bethany wouldn't budge. She insisted that this was a life or death situation, that her entire future hinged on me bailing her out. She painted a picture of utter destitution and ruin if I refused. And then came the emotional manipulation, the guilt trip, the reminders of all the times she had been there for me, which, upon closer inspection, were few and far between. The more I refused, the more desperate she became, until finally the mask slipped. The sweetness vanished, replaced by a cold, hard edge. She accused me of being selfish, of prioritizing money over family, of not caring about her well-being. She even brought up old insecurities, dredging up past mistakes and failures to make me feel small and guilty. The whole conversation left me feeling sick. How could someone I loved, someone I had always supported, treat me this way?
I told her I needed time to think about it, but I already knew what my answer would be. There was no way I could hand over my life savings to someone who clearly had no regard for my future. The next few weeks were agonizing. Bethany bombarded me with calls and texts, each one more desperate and manipulative than the last. She enlisted our parents in her campaign, turning them against me, painting me as the villain who was abandoning his own sister in her time of need. I tried to explain my side of the story, but they wouldn't listen. They were so caught up in Bethany's drama that they couldn't see the bigger picture. I started to feel isolated, like I was the only sane person in a world gone mad. I knew I had to stand my ground, but it was getting harder and harder to resist the pressure. Then came the betrayal. I received a call from my boss, informing me that my position was being eliminated due to restructuring. I was shocked. I had always been a dedicated and valuable employee. When I asked for more details, he was evasive, but I could tell he was uncomfortable. He mentioned something about concerns about my performance and negative feedback from colleagues. That's when it hit me. Bethany had sabotaged me. She had used her connections, her charm, her manipulative skills to undermine my reputation at work, to create a situation where I could be easily dismissed. She knew that losing my job would make me even more desperate for money, that I would be more likely to cave to her demands. She had played me like a fiddle, and I had fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. The person I trusted most was one of them. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My carefully constructed life, the one I had worked so hard to build, was crumbling before my eyes. The pink slip felt like a brand, searing itself into my skin. I walked out of the office in a daze, the faces of my colleagues blurring past me. Some offered sympathetic glances, others averted their eyes,
and a few wore thinly veiled smirks. I knew what they were thinking. Avery's finally getting what he deserves. The drive home was a blur of red lights and angry horns. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had happened. How could Bethany do this to me? How could she be so cruel, so calculating? The woman I had always considered my sister, my family, had deliberately destroyed my career, my livelihood, all for the sake of her own selfish desires. The anger started to simmer, a low, burning ember in my chest. It mingled with the fear, the uncertainty, the crushing weight of betrayal. I tried to call Bethany, but she didn't answer. I left a message, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and hurt. I demanded an explanation, demanded to know why she had done this to me. But she remained silent, hidden behind a wall of guilt and denial. Days turned into weeks, and the situation only worsened.
The bills started piling up, the mortgage payments loomed large, and my savings dwindled with alarming speed. I frantically searched for a new job, sending out resumes and attending interviews, but the market was tight, and my sudden dismissal raised red flags with potential employers. The whispers followed me, the rumors of performance issues and negative feedback poisoning the well. It felt like Bethany's shadow was hanging over me, sabotaging every attempt to get back on my feet. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events in my head, trying to understand where I had gone wrong. I tossed and turned, haunted by nightmares of financial ruin and social isolation. The weight of injustice pressed down on me, suffocating me, stealing my breath. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of despair, with no lifeline in sight. The silence from my parents was deafening. They had completely sided with Bethany, convinced that I was the one who was being unreasonable, that I was punishing her for a simple mistake. They refused to listen to my side of the story, dismissing my concerns as petty grievances. I felt like I had lost my entire family, that I was completely alone in the world. The eviction notice arrived on a cold, gray morning. It was a stark, official document, informing me that I had 30 days to vacate my home. The words seemed to swim before my eyes, blurring into a meaningless jumble. This was it. This was the final blow. Bethany had not only taken my job and my savings, but she was now taking my home, my security, my very sense of self. I sank to my knees, the weight of the world crashing down on me. The tears streamed down my face, hot and bitter, as I finally allowed myself to feel the full extent of my pain and despair. They were celebrating inside, toasting to my ruin, their laughter echoing in the cold night air. They thought they had crushed me, taken everything, left me with nothing but shattered dreams and an empty bank account. They were wrong. I was a coiled spring, and the day they betrayed me was the day they signed their own doom. The weight of the eviction notice was crushing. I stumbled out of the house, not knowing where to go, my car packed with the remnants of my life. The bank accounts were nearly empty, and the severance pay was long gone. Friends, once plentiful, had slowly vanished. Uncomfortable with my misfortune, unsure how to handle the Avery situation. My parents remained unreachable, their loyalty firmly with Bethany. I was adrift, a ghost in my own life, stripped bare of everything I had worked for. I spent the next few nights in my car, parked in the shadows of abandoned lots, the city lights mocking my despair. Sleep was fitful, punctuated by anxiety dreams and the gnawing fear of the unknown.
Each morning brought a fresh wave of humiliation as I washed up in gas station bathrooms and tried to piece together a semblance of normalcy. I applied for countless jobs, but the rejections piled up, each one a nail in the coffin of my hope. I considered swallowing my pride and asking for help, but the thought of facing Bethany's smug satisfaction, of enduring my parents' judgment, was unbearable. The shame was a constant companion, whispering insidious lies in my ear, telling me I was worthless, a failure, that I deserved everything that was happening to me. One evening, parked overlooking the river, the city lights shimmering like fallen stars, I found myself staring into the dark water. The thought flickered, a brief, tempting escape, an end to the pain, the humiliation, the relentless struggle. The water looked so calm, so inviting. a way out. But then a memory surfaced. My grandfather, a man of quiet strength and unwavering resolve, had always told me, "When life knocks you down, Avery, you get back up. You dust yourself off, and you fight even harder." His words, spoken years ago, echoed in my mind, a lifeline in the darkness. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, and took a deep breath. The urge didn't disappear completely, but something shifted. A spark of defiance ignited within me, a refusal to surrender. They wanted me broken. They wanted me gone. They would have to try harder. I would not give them the satisfaction. I started small. I cleaned out my car, meticulously organizing the chaos that reflected my inner turmoil. I showered and shaved, trying to reclaim some semblance of dignity. I forced myself to eat, even though my stomach churned with anxiety. Then I started to plan. Not a grand, elaborate scheme, but a series of small, incremental steps to claw my way back from the abyss. I researched legal aid options, explored government assistance programs, and reached out to old contacts from previous jobs. I spent hours at the library, poring over books on finance and investing, educating myself on the very systems that had failed me. I started to see things more clearly, to understand the vulnerabilities in Bethany's facade, the cracks in her carefully constructed world. Her biggest weakness? They thought they were untouchable. And that's when the anger transformed from a destructive force into a cold, calculating resolve. It wasn't enough to simply survive. I wanted justice. I wanted them to pay for what they had done. I smiled. I acted broken, but I was recording everything. The eviction notice fluttered to the ground, a cruel joke illuminated by the flashing blue and red lights. They were celebrating inside, toasting to my ruin, their laughter echoing in the cold night air. They thought they had crushed me, taken everything, left me with nothing but shattered dreams and an empty bank account. They were wrong. I was a coiled spring, and the day they betrayed me was the day they signed their own doom.
I would become their worst nightmare. I smiled. I acted broken. But I was recording everything. The first step was gathering evidence, irrefutable proof of Bethany's sabotage and my parents' complicity. I knew that simply accusing them wouldn't be enough. I needed to build an airtight case, one that could withstand any scrutiny. My old phone became my most valuable weapon. I started documenting every interaction, every phone call, every text message. I knew Bethany was too clever to put anything incriminating in writing, so I had to find ways to lure her into traps, to coax her into revealing her true intentions. I baited her with carefully crafted messages, hinting at desperation, at the verge of giving up. It wasn't easy. I had to swallow my pride, to feign vulnerability, to play the role of the defeated victim. But it was worth it. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to piece together the puzzle, collecting snippets of information that, when combined, painted a damning picture. I even started wearing a small, hidden camera during my visits to my parents, capturing their biased opinions and their dismissive attitudes towards my situation. The camera caught their true colors. The next step was to understand the legal landscape, to identify the specific laws that Bethany had broken. I spent hours at the library, researching employment law, defamation law, and even fraud. I discovered that Bethany's actions could potentially be classified as tortious interference with a business relationship, a serious offense that could result in significant financial penalties. The details were complex and confusing, but I was determined to master them. I consulted with a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies, who listened patiently to my story, her expression growing increasingly grim as I laid out the evidence. She confirmed my suspicions. Bethany had indeed committed several actionable offenses. However, she cautioned that proving my case would be difficult, requiring meticulous documentation and a strong legal strategy. Ms. Davies agreed to represent me on a contingency basis, meaning she would only get paid if we won the case. It was a huge relief, knowing that I had a skilled advocate on my side. I also needed to find a way to counteract the negative narrative that Bethany had created about me at my former workplace. I knew that my reputation was damaged, but I refused to let it define me. I contacted former colleagues, those I trusted, and explained my side of the story, providing them with evidence of Bethany's deceit. Some were skeptical, but others were supportive, offering to provide character references and testify on my behalf if necessary. I even managed to get my hands on some internal emails that revealed Bethany's efforts to undermine me, further solidifying my case.
The planning was meticulous, and it had to be. I spent hours learning the ins and outs of digital forensics. Bethany, I knew, was good, but she wasn't perfect. She had left a trail, a faint digital footprint that I intended to exploit. I learned how to recover deleted files, how to trace IP addresses, how to analyze metadata. It was like learning a new language, but I was driven by a singular purpose: justice. I discovered that Bethany had used my work computer to send anonymous emails to my boss, spreading false rumors and planting seeds of doubt about my performance. The emails were cleverly disguised, using proxy servers and encrypted messaging, but I was able to trace them back to Bethany's personal email account. The evidence was mounting, but I knew I needed more. I needed a smoking gun, something that would definitively prove Bethany's malice and her intention to harm me. I decided to confront her, not in anger, but in a carefully orchestrated act of deception. I arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop, and pretended that I was finally ready to give in to her demands. I told her that I was considering liquidating my retirement fund, that I was desperate to help her. Her eyes lit up with excitement, her mask of concern momentarily slipping. I used the opportunity to subtly record our conversation, capturing her admissions of guilt and her callous disregard for my well-being. I acted desperate. I let her think that she had won. She practically admitted everything. It was all on tape. There were close calls. Once, while I was reviewing the hidden camera footage from my parents' house, Bethany walked in unexpectedly. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, and quickly minimized the video. She eyed me suspiciously, asking what I was doing on my computer. I stammered, making up some excuse about searching for job openings. She seemed unconvinced, but thankfully she didn't press the issue. Another time, I received a cryptic text message from an unknown number, warning me to back off and leave Bethany alone. It was clearly a veiled threat, intended to intimidate me. I ignored it, but it served as a reminder that I was playing a dangerous game, that Bethany was capable of anything. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I felt like a coiled spring, stretched to the breaking point, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. I knew that my plan was risky, that there was a chance it could backfire, but I was prepared to take that chance. I had nothing left to lose. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. The plan was about to be set in motion.
I had to time the release of the information for maximum impact. I decided to wait until Bethany received a major promotion she had been coveting for months, a vice president role that would solidify her position at the company. It was the perfect moment to strike, to shatter her carefully constructed facade and expose her for who she truly was. I waited, I planned, I watched. I started by sending an anonymous email to the CEO of Bethany's company, a man known for his ruthless pursuit of integrity and ethical behavior. The email contained a summary of my findings, along with links to the audio and video recordings, the recovered emails, and the forensic analysis of Bethany's digital activity. I made it clear that I had irrefutable proof of Bethany's sabotage and her attempts to ruin my career. I included copies of the documentation I had on my parents, letting him know that I was fully prepared to expose the whole situation if necessary. I ended the email with a simple statement: the truth will come out. The next day, I contacted several journalists known for their investigative reporting and their willingness to take on powerful figures. I provided them with the same information, offering them an exclusive story that would expose the dark underbelly of corporate ambition and betrayal. I knew that the media would devour the story, that it would generate a firestorm of controversy that Bethany couldn't possibly control. I set up an anonymous website, a digital repository for all the evidence I had collected. The site was designed to be easily accessible and shareable, ensuring that the information would spread like wildfire across the internet. I even created a series of social media accounts using pseudonyms to protect my identity and started posting teasers and snippets of information to generate buzz and anticipation.
I knew that Bethany monitored my every move, that she was constantly searching for any sign of retaliation. So I made sure to maintain the facade of the defeated victim, continuing to send her messages of desperation and vulnerability. I even reached out to her parents, feigning reconciliation, telling them that I was finally ready to move on and forgive Bethany for her mistakes. They were ecstatic, eager to put the whole thing behind them. Little did they know, they were walking right into my trap. The waiting was agonizing. I spent sleepless nights, pacing the floor, replaying the events in my head, wondering if my plan would work. I knew that Bethany was a formidable opponent, that she would fight back with everything she had. But I was prepared. I had anticipated her every move, and I had a counter strategy for every possible scenario. The days ticked by. Then, the dam broke. The CEO of Bethany's company called an emergency board meeting. The journalists started sniffing around, contacting Bethany and her colleagues for comment.
The social media accounts exploded with activity, the anonymous website receiving thousands of hits. Bethany's world began to unravel. I watched from the shadows, a grim satisfaction washing over me as I witnessed the chaos unfold. She tried to deny the allegations, to dismiss the evidence as fabricated and manipulated. But it was no use. The truth was out there, undeniable and irrefutable. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. That morning, Bethany was escorted out of her office by security guards, her career in ruins, her reputation in tatters. The news spread like wildfire, dominating headlines and social media feeds. My parents, horrified by the revelations, finally realized the extent of Bethany's deception and their own complicity. They tried to contact me, begging for forgiveness, but I refused to answer their calls. They had made their choice, and they had to live with the consequences. The trap had sprung. That night, I received a text message from Bethany. It was short, but filled with venom. "You ruined me." I simply replied, "You started it." The message sent, I turned off my phone, a sense of profound peace washing over me. It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. The legal battles were just beginning. But I had won the first and most important victory. I had exposed the truth, and I had reclaimed my life. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. The next part was the hardest, the calm before the storm. I knew Bethany wasn't going down alone. My parents were next. They chose her. Now they got to feel the weight of that decision. I planned it perfectly. It was time for the world to see the people they really were. A slow smile crept across my face. The game had just begun. The trap had sprung. The next target, my parents. Their betrayal cut deeper than Bethany's. Family should have been my safe harbor. Instead, they chose sides, fueled by Bethany's lies and their own prejudices. It was time for them to face the music. I started by leaking the hidden camera footage I'd captured of them to local news outlets. The video showed their dismissive attitude towards my struggles, their unwavering support for Bethany, and their blatant disregard for the truth. The footage went viral, sparking outrage in the community. People were disgusted by their lack of empathy and their own willingness to turn a blind eye to Bethany's actions. The backlash was swift and severe. Their business, a small but well-regarded accounting firm, suffered a massive blow. Clients deserted them in droves, unwilling to associate with people who had shown such callous disregard for their own child. Their reputation, carefully cultivated over decades, was ruined in a matter of days. The phone rang nonstop. It was reporters. It was angry neighbors. It was former friends. They tried to do damage control, issuing a public apology, claiming that they had been misled by Bethany and that they regretted their actions. But it was too late. The damage was done. No one believed them. Their excuses fell on deaf ears. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a cold satisfaction settling in my stomach. They had prioritized Bethany's success over my well-being, and now they were paying the price. The next step was to expose their financial improprieties. I had discovered during my research that my parents had been engaging in some shady accounting practices for years, skimming profits and evading taxes. It wasn't a fortune, but enough to land them in serious trouble. I anonymously tipped off the IRS, providing them with the documentation I had gathered. Within weeks, they were under investigation, their assets frozen, their business on the verge of collapse.
The stress was immense. I could see it in their faces, etched with worry and regret. They had lost everything: their business, their reputation, and the respect of their community. Even their friends had abandoned them. They were completely isolated, left to face the consequences of their actions alone. They reached out to me, desperate for forgiveness, begging me to intervene on their behalf. They promised to make amends, to do whatever it took to earn back my trust. But I remained unmoved. Their apologies rang hollow. Their promises were meaningless. They had had their chance, and they had blown it. I changed my number. I filed a restraining order. I wanted nothing to do with them. The news of Bethany's downfall and my parents' troubles spread quickly through our small town. People whispered. They gossiped. They took sides. Some condemned me for my ruthlessness, accusing me of being vindictive and unforgiving. Others praised me for my courage, applauding me for standing up for myself and seeking justice. I didn't care what they thought. I had done what I had to do. I had protected myself. I had restored my honor. I sold the house that I had once shared with my parents, the house filled with so many memories, both good and bad. I needed a fresh start, a clean break from the past. I moved to a new city, a place where no one knew my name or my story. I started a new business, a small consulting firm that specialized in helping people navigate the complexities of the modern economy. I was good at it. I was passionate about it. I was determined to succeed. I never heard from Bethany again. She had disappeared, vanished from the face of the earth. Some said she had moved to another country, changed her name, and started a new life. Others said she was living in seclusion, consumed by shame and regret. I didn't know, and I didn't care. She was no longer a part of my life. As for my parents, they eventually pleaded guilty to the tax evasion charges and were sentenced to probation and a hefty fine. They lost their accounting firm and were forced to sell their house.
They moved into a small apartment, living a quiet and anonymous life. I never saw them again. I never spoke to them again. They lost everything. I just smiled. Years passed. I built a successful business. I found new friends. I created a new life, one that was filled with joy, purpose, and meaning. I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made. I learned to trust my instincts. I learned to value my own worth. One day, I was sitting in my office, looking out at the city skyline, when I received an email from an unknown sender. The email contained a single photograph, a picture of Bethany, taken from a distance. She looked older. She looked tired. She looked broken. The photograph was accompanied by a short message. She's working as a waitress in a diner in Montana. I stared at the photograph for a long time, a mixture of emotions swirling inside me. Pity, sadness, relief, but not revenge. Not anymore. I deleted the email. I closed my laptop. I walked away. The past was the past. It was time to move on. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's a shield, a lesson, a boundary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.